Inside Kang Min-jun's mansion, maids didn't get dismissed. They resigned, quietly. Sometimes overnight, sometimes before sunrise. No one stayed long enough to explain why, until Hannah arrived. The first thing she noticed about the mansion was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, structured silence, measured silence, the kind that made footsteps sound like mistakes. Even the gates opened without noise. The guards spoke only when necessary. The driveway curved through trimmed hedges so perfectly aligned they looked supervised rather than maintained. By the time Hannah reached the main entrance, she already understood something important. This was not a house where people improvised their behavior. This was a house where people followed systems. The doors opened before she touched them. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar wood polish and something colder, something controlled. 3 maids passed her without greeting, not rudely, carefully. They lowered their heads slightly as they moved. Not submission, protocol. Hannah noticed everything, and she kept walking. Madame Choi was waiting near the reception corridor. She did not introduce herself immediately. Instead, she studied Hannah first, carefully, as if measuring how long she would last. "You are the new hire," she said finally. "Yes," Hannah replied. Not loudly, not timidly, just clearly. Madame Choi's eyes paused for half a second longer than expected. Most new staff whispered their answers here. Confidence did not belong in this corridor. "Follow me," she said. They walked through the West Passage first. "This wing is administrative," she explained. "Staff do not remain here unless assigned." Then the Central Hall. "This corridor connects to the chairman's working areas. Movement here is restricted unless instructed." Then the staircase. "No one uses the east staircase without permission." Her tone never changed. Not once. She wasn't warning Hannah. She was teaching her survival rules. "In this house," Madame Choi continued, "efficiency is respect." Hannah nodded once. "I understand." Another pause. "You may not," Madame Choi corrected gently, "but you will." By mid-morning, Hannah had already learned something else. No one spoke the chairman's name casually. Staff referred to him carefully, chairman, or simply, sir. Not because they were forced to, because precision mattered here, and precision began with language. The first resignation happened before noon. Hannah didn't see it directly. She noticed it through absence. A maid who had been polishing the south railing simply wasn't there anymore. Her cart remained, her gloves remained, but she did not. Hannah turned slightly toward another staff member. Where did she go? The maid hesitated before answering. She resigned. Hannah blinked. She left during her shift? Yes. No explanation followed, because none was expected. The chairman arrived at exactly 12:40 p.m. No announcement, no footsteps warning anyone first. Yet somehow the entire mansion adjusted instantly. Conversation stopped, movement straightened, even the air shifted. Hannah didn't turn immediately, but she felt it. That quiet change in atmosphere that only happens when authority enters a space without asking permission. Then she looked. Kang Min-jun walked through the central corridor like someone who expected the world to remain organized around him. Not arrogant, not theatrical, precise. Everything about him looked intentional. His posture, his pace, even the direction of his attention. Staff lowered their heads slightly as he passed. Not dramatically, just enough. Hannah noticed something else. No one tried to be visible, but no one disappeared either. This house did not reward invisibility. It rewarded correctness. She met him for the first time 15 minutes later, without realizing she was meeting him. A flower arrangement stood slightly off-center near the east hallway entrance, not obviously wrong, but not aligned with the corridor's symmetry either. Hannah paused, studied it, then adjusted it gently. 1 inch left, 2 degrees inward. Now it matched the hallway perfectly. She continued walking. 30 minutes later, the question moved through the corridor quietly. Who adjusted the east hallway arrangement? It wasn't asked loudly. It didn't need to be. Questions like that only came from one person. Staff froze. No one answered, because answering meant visibility, and visibility meant risk. Madam Choi stepped forward slightly. "I will confirm immediately, Chairman." But before she could move, Hannah spoke. "I adjusted it." Silence spread instantly through the corridor. Not shock, impact. No one answered the chairman directly unless spoken to first, yet she had, and she had done it calmly, not defensively, not apologetically, just truthfully. Min-jun looked at her properly for the first time. Not long, just enough to understand what he was seeing. "Why?" he asked. "It was misaligned," Hannah replied. Still calm, still steady, still not lowering her voice. A longer silence followed. Then he said, "It is correct now," and continued walking. No correction, no warning, no discipline, nothing. That was the moment the corridor changed its opinion of Hannah, because in this house, being noticed without consequence was not normal. It was rare. Later that evening, as staff rotations shifted toward closing assignments, Madam Choi watched Hannah from across the corridor, not openly, carefully, thoughtfully. She had supervised new staff inside Kang Min-jun's residence for 11 years, and she knew exactly how attention worked in this house, and she knew exactly what it meant when it appeared early, very early, too early. Madam Choi had seen new maids before, but never one the chairman noticed on the first day. By Hannah's third morning inside Kang Min-jun's mansion, she had already learned something important. The house did not repeat instructions. It expected understanding. Assignments were written once. Rules were explained once. After that, mistakes belonged to the person who made them. So when she received her corridor cleaning list that morning, she followed it exactly the way she believed she was supposed to. West Corridor, Central Landing, Upper East Passage, final room at the end of the East Wing. Door closed, no label, no restriction sign, no warning. To Hannah, it looked like every other assigned space she had already cleaned since arriving, so she opened it. The room felt different immediately. Not larger, not brighter, not more luxurious, just quieter. The kind of quiet that meant the space belonged to someone who valued control more than comfort. Nothing inside the room was out of place, not a single paper angled incorrectly, not a single surface holding unnecessary objects. Even the curtains fell in exact lines. Hannah paused for half a second. Then she began working. She dusted carefully, adjusted the window slightly for ventilation, straightened the writing desk alignment by a fraction, changed the water beside the bedside table, every movement precise, efficient, respectful. When she finished, the room looked untouched, only cleaner, only calmer, only more balanced. So she closed the door and continued her assignment route. The mistake was discovered 40 minutes later, not by the chairman, by another maid. The woman froze when she saw the clean cart entry recorded beside that corridor number. "You cleaned that room?" she whispered. "Yes," Hannah answered. The woman's face changed immediately. "You went inside?" "Yes." "You touched things inside?" "I cleaned the room." The maid stepped back slowly. "You weren't supposed to enter there." Hannah blinked once. "It was on my assignment list." "No," the woman said quietly. "That room is never on anyone's list." The silence that followed spread quickly through the East Corridor. Staff stopped moving normally. Two assistants exchanged glances. Someone quietly removed a cleaning trolley from the hallway as if distance alone might correct the mistake. Even Madame Choi arrived faster than usual. "You entered that room?" she asked. Her voice stayed calm, but not neutral. "Yes," Hannah answered. "You cleaned it?" "Yes." "Who instructed you?" "No one. It was included in my corridor rotation." Madame Choi's expression did not change, but her eyes did. "He returns in 10 minutes," she said, and walked away. No one explained anything after that. No one needed to. The corridor itself felt different now, tighter, quieter, waiting. Hannah continued her duties because there was nothing else to do. Inside this house, mistakes were not corrected through discussion. They were corrected through consequence. Kang Min-jun returned at exactly 12:40 p.m., the time he always returned. The corridor aligned instantly when he entered. Staff stepped aside slightly, heads lowered slightly, movement slowed slightly. Everything adjusted the way it always did. Except today, something else waited at the end of the hallway. He reached his room, opened the door, stopped. No one inside the corridor could see what changed, but everyone felt it. He stepped inside, closed the door, and remained there longer than usual. When he stepped back into the hallway, the silence had already prepared itself. "Who entered my room?" His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The question moved through the corridor like pressure. No one answered, because answering meant stepping forward, and stepping forward meant accepting responsibility inside the chairman's private space. Hannah stepped forward. "I did." The corridor froze. Even breathing seemed louder now. Min-jun looked at her properly, for the first time since the flower arrangement correction. This time, his attention did not move away quickly. "Why?" he asked. "It was part of my assigned cleaning rotation," she replied. "That room is not assigned." "I didn't know that." Silence followed, longer this time, colder. "What did you move?" he asked. "I cleaned the surfaces," she said. "I replaced the water. I adjusted the window. I aligned the desk." Every sentence tightened the hallway further, because each detail confirmed something worse than entry. She had touched the room, changed the room, entered his private space completely. "That room should not be entered," he said finally. "Yes, Chairman." "That room should not be cleaned." "Yes, Chairman." "That room should not be adjusted." "Yes, Chairman." His voice stayed controlled, but something inside it had hardened. "You will not enter it again." "Yes, Chairman." Another silence followed. Everyone in the corridor understood what normally came next: dismissal, immediate reassignment, removal, sometimes resignation before evening. Instead, he said nothing else and walked past her. The corridor did not move for several seconds, because that had never happened before. Not after someone entered his private room, not after someone changed anything inside it, not after someone admitted it directly. Later that evening, Madame Choi was standing at the end of the hallway watching Hannah complete her final rotation duties. Her expression was thoughtful now, not supervisory, not neutral, careful. She had expected the chairman to dismiss her immediately. Instead, he had done something far more unusual. He had allowed her to stay. And inside Kang Min-jun's house, that kind of decision was never accidental.
After the incident with the chairman's room, the mansion treated Hannah differently. Not openly, not cruelly, but carefully. Staff spoke to her less. Instructions came more precisely. Even corridor rotations shifted slightly around her presence, as if the house itself had adjusted its distance. Only one thing remained unchanged. Kang Min-jun did not mention the room again. Not once. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than punishment. The nightmare began 3 nights later. It was past midnight when Hannah first heard the sound. At first, she thought it came from outside the east wing. A door shifting. A step misplaced. Something ordinary. Something she could ignore. Inside Kang Min-jun's mansion, staff did not investigate unfamiliar sounds after midnight unless instructed. So she kept walking. The second sound was not ordinary. It was a voice. Low. Strained. Not speaking clearly. Not speaking to anyone. Speaking like someone trapped inside a memory they couldn't leave. Hannah stopped. The sound came from the chairman's corridor. She should not have moved closer. Everyone knew that. Everyone understood the distance that corridor required. But something in that voice did not sound like authority. It sounded like pain. The door was not fully closed. Just slightly open. Enough to let the sound escape. Enough to reveal what no one else in the house had ever seen. Kang Min-jun stood beside the bed, breathing unevenly. One hand pressed against the edge of the table beside him. His shoulders were tense. Too tense. Like someone still standing inside something dangerous even though the danger was gone. No. The word escaped him quietly. Then again. No. He wasn't awake. Not completely. Hannah stepped inside before she could stop herself. Chairman. No response. His breathing tightened again. His hand knocked the glass beside the table slightly sideways without noticing. He was somewhere else entirely. Not in the mansion. Not in the present. Somewhere darker. Somewhere older. Chairman. Her voice softened. Still no response. So she did the only thing she could think to do. She picked up the fallen glass, walked closer, and placed it gently into his hand. Drink. The word was quiet. Careful. Grounding. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. Like someone returning from a place he didn't want anyone to witness. What are you doing here? His voice was sharp now. Controlled again. Cold again. I heard something, she answered. You shouldn't be here. I know. Leave. But he hadn't released the glass. He was still holding it. Still breathing harder than normal. Still not fully steady. So she didn't move immediately. Drink first, she said softly. Silence filled the space between them. Then, he drank. Only once. Only enough to steady his breathing. Only enough to return completely to himself. Leave, he repeated. This time quieter. She nodded. Yes, Chairman. And walked toward the door. She didn't look back. Didn't ask questions. Didn't apologize. She simply left the room exactly the way she had entered it. Carefully. Without making the moment heavier than it already was. He didn't sleep again that night. Not properly. Not deeply. But something had changed. Because someone had seen him without control. And stayed calm anyway. The next morning, nothing about him looked different. His posture remained exact. His voice remained steady. His instructions remained precise. The house followed him the same way it always did. As if the night had never happened. Until the corridor incident before lunch. One of the junior assistants attempted to reassign Hannah unnecessarily again. Not incorrectly. Just sharply. A reminder of her place. Before she could respond, Min-jun spoke. She remains on her current rotation. The assistant stepped back immediately. Yes, Chairman. No explanation followed. No correction continued. And once again, everyone in the corridor noticed. Madame Choi noticed most of all. Because she had also noticed something else. The East Corridor night movement log. The time entry. The unauthorized presence near the chairman's private wing. Only one name appeared there. Hannah. That evening, Madame Choi called her aside. Not publicly. Not formally. Quietly. You entered his corridor last night. It wasn't a question. Yes, Hannah answered. You spoke to him. Another silence. Yes. Madame Choi's eyes did not move away from her face. What did you see? Hannah answered honestly. He wasn't well. Something changed behind Madame Choi's expression then. Not anger. Something deeper. Older. More protective. You were not supposed to see that, she said softly. I didn't mean to. Madame Choi studied her for several seconds longer. As if measuring something carefully inside her own thoughts. Then she said something she had never said to any staff member before. You don't understand what it means to stand that close to him. And for the first time since Hannah arrived at the mansion, Madame Choi stopped seeing her as temporary staff. She started seeing her as a threat.
Madame Choi did not sleep well that night. She had lived inside Kang Min-jun's house longer than anyone else still working there, long before the guards, long before the senior staff, long before the silence became structured. She had been there when the house still sounded like a family home, before everything changed, before the night the police arrived, before the boy she raised stopped speaking unless necessary. She found Hannah the next afternoon near the central corridor window. "Walk with me," Madam Choi said. It wasn't a request, so Hannah followed. They didn't go toward the staff wing. They didn't go toward the service corridors. They walked instead toward the older garden passage that few staff used unless assigned. That alone told Hannah this conversation mattered. "When the chairman was 8 years old," Madam Choi said quietly, "his parents were killed." Hannah didn't speak. Madam Choi continued walking slowly beside her. "It happened at night." Her voice remained steady, but something inside it had shifted. "Men came looking for his father, a rival family. They believed removing him would remove the house's influence." She stopped walking. "I hid him." The words landed differently than everything she had said before. "I kept him quiet while the police arrived." Silence followed. Heavy silence. Not mansion silence, memory silence. "He did not cry," Madam Choi continued. "Not that night, not the next morning, not at the funeral." Her eyes moved toward the corridor ahead instead of toward Hannah now. "After that, he stopped letting people get close." Something in her voice softened. "He learned early that attachment disappears." Hannah understood then. The room, the locked structure, the silence, the nightmares. None of it had been personality. It had been survival. "You were inside his room," Madam Choi said next. Not accusing, confirming. "Yes." "You were inside his corridor again that night." "Yes." "And you spoke to him when he was not fully awake." Hannah hesitated only once. "Yes." Madam Choi looked at her properly then, and for the first time since Hannah arrived, there was something emotional in her expression. Not anger, something closer to fear. "I raised him," Madam Choi said quietly. The sentence carried weight Hannah hadn't expected. "I was the one who stayed when everyone else left. I was the one who taught him how to sleep again. I was the one who kept this house steady when there was no one else." Her voice lowered slightly. "He does not let people see him like that." Silence stretched between them. Then she added, "He has never let anyone see him like that." Hannah understood the meaning immediately. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't hierarchy. This was territory. That evening, Kang Min-jun noticed something else changing, not inside the house, inside himself. It started when he passed the east corridor window. Hannah stood there adjusting the curtain alignment slightly, the same way she had adjusted the flower arrangement on her first day. Precise, careful, unafraid. He should have walked past her without stopping. Instead, he slowed, only slightly, but enough to notice. "You should not enter my corridor at night." His voice remained controlled. "Yes, Chairman." "You should not remain there." "Yes, Chairman." "You should not involve yourself in matters that do not concern you." She looked at him then, not challenging, not apologizing, simply answering honestly. "You weren't well." The sentence changed the air between them immediately, because no one inside the house spoke to him that way. Not about his condition, not about his weakness, not about his nights. "You did not have that responsibility," he said. "I know." "Then why did you stay?" Hannah answered without hesitation, "Because you needed someone to." Silence followed, longer than expected, more dangerous than expected, more honest than either of them planned. Something inside his expression shifted slightly then, not visible to most people, but visible to her. And for the first time since Hannah arrived, there was something emotional in her expression, not anger, something closer to fear. That night, Madam Choi made a decision, not quickly, not impulsively, carefully. The same way she had protected him when he was 8 years old, the same way she had protected him when the house first became silent. She would protect him again, even if he did not understand why it was necessary, even if he disagreed, even if it meant removing the person he had started to notice. Across the mansion, Kang Min-jun stood alone in his study longer than usual that night. He reviewed the corridor logs twice, then the assignment rotations once more, then the staff access schedules again. Not because something was wrong, because something inside him was changing, and he did not like not understanding it. For the first time since Hannah entered his house, he began adjusting her assignments himself, not to distance her, but to keep her closer. And somewhere else in the same house, Madame Choi began adjusting them too, not to protect him, but to remove her.
Stories like this are made possible because of you. If you enjoy what you're watching, a like, follow, and share will really help the creator make more beautiful stories for you.
Madame Choi did not think of what she planned as betrayal. She thought of it as protection. Protection sometimes required difficult decisions. Protection sometimes required removing what did not belong inside a fragile structure. And Hannah did not belong inside Kang Min-jun's structure. Not this close, not this fast, not where she could reach him when he was weakest. She had watched the change carefully. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious, but it was there. He stopped correcting Hannah publicly. He stopped redirecting her assignments. He started noticing when she wasn't in her expected corridor position. And worst of all, he allowed her presence during his night weakness. That had never happened before, not once, not in 20 years. Madame Choi had raised him after the night his parents died. She had carried him through grief he never spoke about. She had rebuilt routines he never asked for. She had protected his distance from people who would only disappear later. She knew what attachment did to him. Attachment made him vulnerable, and vulnerability invited loss. Loss had already taken too much from him once. She would not allow it to happen again. So she made a decision. Hannah had to leave the house, but not by dismissal. Dismissal would make him ask questions. Resignation would make him notice. Something quieter had to happen. Something final enough that Hannah could not return. Something that would convince him distance was necessary again. Madame Choi did not contact criminals directly. She contacted someone who handled problems quietly for families like theirs. Men who did not ask questions, men who only followed instructions, men who entered properties when gates opened at the right time, men who disappeared afterward. It must look like opportunity, she said calmly during the call, not intention. The answer came immediately. It always does. The plan required only one adjustment inside the mansion, one schedule shift, one corridor assignment change, one unlocked service entrance. Nothing dramatic, nothing noticeable, nothing that would be traced back easily. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected, 2 nights later. Rain began just after evening rotation. Light rain at first, then steady, then enough to slow guard visibility around the outer perimeter cameras. Perfect. Madame Choi adjusted the evening duty chart herself. No one questioned her authority. No one ever had. "Hannah," she said calmly, handing her the updated sheet. "Storage inventory verification tonight." Hannah accepted the paper immediately. "Yes, madam." "The West Service Corridor." "Yes, madam." That corridor was rarely used after dark, mostly supply rotation, mostly empty after evening staff returned to quarters. It wasn't unusual work, just inconvenient work. Madame Choi watched her leave. Just once. Only once. Then she returned to her office and closed the door. She did not watch the cameras. She did not stand by the window. She did not change her expression. Protection required discipline, even now. The West Service Corridor lights flickered once as Hannah entered. Old wiring, normal, nothing unusual. The storage checklist required verification of 3 rooms. She completed the first 2 quickly. The third room sat near the secondary delivery entrance, the one rarely used at night. She heard the door open behind her before she saw anyone. At first, she assumed security had entered. "Inventory verification," she said automatically without turning. No response. Then footsteps. Not mansion footsteps. not trained, not trained, not different. She turned. 3 men stood inside the corridor, not staff, not security, not anyone she recognized. "Come quietly," one of them said. His voice carried no urgency, only certainty. Hannah stepped backward once. "Who are you?" "Come quietly," he repeated. She moved toward the opposite hallway exit. One of them blocked it immediately. Too fast, too practiced. They had done this before. "Let me go," she said. But even as she spoke, she already understood. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was planned. A cloth pressed over her mouth before she could shout again. The corridor lights blurred. Her vision shifted. Sound faded faster than expected. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the service entrance door closing behind them, quietly, carefully, as if no one had ever passed through it at all. Back inside the mansion, the evening routine continued normally. Dinner preparation completed, corridor rotations ended, night staff checked assignments, logs updated, doors secured. Nothing unusual appeared on schedule reports. Nothing unusual appeared on internal monitors. Nothing unusual appeared anywhere. Except one place. The east corridor window remained untouched that night. The curtain alignment stayed slightly uneven. For the first time since Hannah arrived, no one adjusted it before midnight. And somewhere inside the mansion, Kang Min-jun noticed. Kang Min-jun noticed something was wrong before anyone told him. It was the curtain near the east corridor window. Since Hannah arrived at the mansion, she adjusted it every morning before sunrise. Every morning, without fail. But today, it was still uneven. He stopped walking, only for a moment, then continued toward the breakfast hall. But the silence around that window stayed with him. The morning staff meeting began like every other morning. Reports, schedules, kitchen updates, security notes, routine, until he asked one question. "Where's Hannah?" The entire room became quiet. No one expected him to ask that, because the chairman never asked about individual staff members. Never. One supervisor checked the duty list quickly. She was assigned to check the storage rooms at the back hallway last night. And this morning, the supervisor hesitated. "She hasn't reported for duty yet." Min-jun looked up slowly. "She hasn't reported?" "No, Chairman. No one misses morning duty in this house," he said quietly. "Check her room." A staff assistant left immediately. The room stayed silent while they waited. 2 minutes passed, then 3. Then the assistant returned. "She isn't there." Something changed in the air. Hannah was not late. She was missing. "Show me the camera from the back storage hallway," Min-jun said. The footage appeared on the wall screen. Everyone watched. Hannah entered the hallway carrying her checklist. She checked one storage room, then another, then she walked toward the third room near the back gate. Then suddenly, the camera flickered. The picture shook. 7 seconds passed. When the image returned, she was gone. No one spoke, because everyone understood what that meant. Someone had taken her, inside the mansion. "Who assigned her that hallway last night?" Min-jun asked. The supervisor checked again, then answered carefully. "Madam Choi." Min-jun did not react immediately. Instead, he asked another question. "Who opened the back gate last night?" Security checked the record tablet, then looked up. "Madam Choi opened it, Chairman." This time, the silence in the room felt heavier, not confused, not uncertain, dangerous. "Call her," Min-jun said. Madam Choi arrived within minutes. She stood in front of him calmly, just like she always did. "You asked for me?" "Yes." He turned the screen toward her. "This is last night." She watched the footage. Her expression did not change. "You assigned Hannah to that hallway." "Yes." "Why?" "The storage rooms needed checking." "At night." "Yes." He held her gaze. "And why was the back gate open?" "For a delivery." "There was no delivery scheduled." Madam Choi did not answer immediately. For a second, but Min-jun noticed. He always noticed hesitation. "Security," he said quietly. "Yes, Chairman." Lock every gate. Yes, Chairman. No staff leave the property. Yes, Chairman. Search the entire house again. Yes, Chairman. Then he did something no one expected. I'm joining the search. The room froze because Kang Min-jun never joined searches himself. He gave orders. He stayed in control. He did not go looking. Not personally. Not ever. Madam Choi looked at him then, really looked at him, and something inside her expression changed because now she understood something she had not expected. He was not treating this like a missing worker. He was treating this like someone important. Security teams spread across the mansion immediately. Kitchen corridors, staff quarters, garden paths, parking wing, guest house, storage building. Nothing. No sign of her anywhere. One guard returned with new information. Chairman, yes, there are tire marks near the back gate. Min-jun turned immediately. Show me. The ground near the service road behind the mansion was still soft from last night's rain. Fresh vehicle tracks cut across the mud. Not a delivery truck, not a staff vehicle. Something smaller, something faster, something that left quickly. They took her through here, Min-jun said. No one argued, because it was obvious now. Someone had entered his house, taken her, and left without permission. Security spoke again. The camera outside the back gate stopped working for 10 seconds last night. 10 seconds? Min-jun repeated. Yes, Chairman. That's not a mistake, he said quietly. That was planned. He turned back toward the mansion slowly, every step controlled, every thought precise. Someone inside his house helped them, someone he trusted. Bring me the full gate records, he said. Yes, Chairman, and bring Madam Choi to my office. This time his voice was different, not cold, not calm, not distant, something else, something older, something he had not used in years, because now Kang Min-jun was no longer just searching for answers, he was preparing to find out who betrayed him.
Security teams moved fast after that. Orders spread through the mansion like electricity. Vehicles were prepared. Gate access locked. External surveillance activated. No one spoke louder than necessary, because everyone could feel something had changed. This was no longer a routine search. This was personal. One of the senior guards approached him. Chairman, we will handle the external search from here. Min-jun was already putting on his coat. I'm coming. The guard froze. Chairman, I said, he repeated calmly, I'm coming. No one argued after that, because something in his voice made it clear this was not a decision anyone else could make for him. The convoy left the mansion within minutes. 3 vehicles, no lights, no noise, just movement. Rain from the night before still covered the roads in a thin reflective layer that caught the headlights as they drove toward the service road beyond the estate boundary. Security followed the tire tracks first, then the broken camera signal timeline. Then the direction the vehicle must have taken after leaving the gate. It didn't take long. They didn't go far, one of the guards said quietly. Min-jun didn't answer, because he already knew. Kidnappers who move fast inside a controlled estate environment rarely travel far. They hide close. They wait. They expect delay. They expect confusion. They did not expect him. The warehouse appeared at the end of a narrow service road behind an unused logistics structure connected to one of the older estate supply routes. Security vehicles stopped before reaching the entrance. Lights off, doors opened quietly. One guard spoke into his radio. Movement confirmed inside. Min-jun stepped forward. The guard turned toward him. Chairman, please remain here. No. The answer came immediately. I'm going inside. And this time, no one tried to stop him. The interception happened fast. 2 men tried to leave through the rear exit. Security caught them before they reached the road. Another tried the side entrance. He didn't make it past the loading area. The 4th never even reached the door. Min-jun watched everything without speaking, without hesitation, without fear, because there was only one question left now. Was she inside? The warehouse door opened. The interior smelled like old wood and damp concrete. One of the guards moved ahead with a flashlight. "Clear." Another voice followed from deeper inside. "Clear." Then, "Chairman." Min-jun walked forward, past stacked crates, past unused shelving, past broken transport pallets, until he reached the storage room at the far end of the building. And stopped. She was there. Sitting on the floor, her hands tied, her hair slightly loose from where she had struggled earlier. But she was awake. She was safe. And she was looking directly at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because neither of them had expected the other to be the first thing they would see. Then she smiled. Small, relieved, certain. "You came!" Not security, not the guards, not the police. Him. He crossed the room immediately. The rope around her wrists was already being cut by one of the guards before he even reached her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No." His shoulders lowered slightly. Just slightly, but enough for the nearest guard to notice. Outside the warehouse, the suspects were already being questioned. At first, they said nothing. Then one of them spoke. "We were told only to move her." "By who?" security demanded. The man hesitated. Min-jun stepped closer, and suddenly the hesitation disappeared. "Madam Choi." No one moved. No one spoke. Because everyone understood what that meant. This hadn't been random. This hadn't been external. This had been planned. Inside his house. That night, the mansion felt different in a way no one could ignore. Madam Choi was gone. Not argued with, not debated, just removed. And the silence she used to maintain so carefully suddenly felt heavier without her in it. Hannah stood near the east corridor window, still, watching the curtain she always adjusted. Her fingers moved slightly toward it out of habit, then stopped. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn immediately. She already knew it was him. Kang Min-jun stopped a short distance away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them wasn't tense anymore. It was uncertain in a different way now. Like something had already changed and neither of them knew how to return to what came before. "I didn't think it would feel like this," he said quietly. Hannah turned slightly toward him. "Like what?" "Quiet," he answered. A pause. "I thought removing the problem would make everything normal again." He looked at the empty space in the house, then back at her. But it didn't. There was something in his expression now that wasn't authority, not control, just honesty that he wasn't used to saying out loud. "When you disappeared," he continued, "I didn't think about rules, or the house, or anything I usually think about." His voice lowered slightly. "I only thought about finding you." Hannah didn't interrupt. She just listened. "I kept telling myself I was fine without people getting close," he said, "that it was safer that way." A faint pause. But it wasn't safety. It was just distance. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft. He stepped a little closer, not enough to pressure her, just enough that his voice didn't have to carry. "I don't want to go back to that," he said. Hannah's expression softened slightly, but she still stayed steady. "Then don't," she said simply. That was all she said, but it landed more clearly than anything else in the room. His breath slowed a little, like something inside him had finally stopped tightening. For a moment, he just looked at her, like he was making a decision he couldn't undo. Then he closed the distance between them. Not suddenly, not aggressively, just completely. He kissed her. There was no hesitation in it anymore. Not confusion, not restraint, not distance trying to protect anything. Just certainty after everything that had already been lost and found. When he pulled back slightly, he didn't step away. His forehead rested gently against hers, as if even the smallest space between them suddenly felt unnecessary. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because at that moment, nothing in the mansion mattered anymore except the fact that she was there, and he had finally stopped letting her go. And this time, he didn't move away.